And now we'll have Dr. Beau Lotto, who is the founder of Ripple and the Lab of Misfits. He's going to take you on a magical mystery tour of the brain and tell you about ways that deviate that are good. Beau?
Good morning, everybody. Can we hear me with this? Yes? Yes. Okay, brilliant. So, how many of you woke up this morning thinking that you saw the world as it really is? Thank goodness, the organizers, right? Anyone else seeing the world as it really is? A few? Okay, if you're not seeing the world as it really is, what are you seeing? Right? A fundamental question. Does the brain do accuracy? Right? So let's do a quick test to see how accurate you are at seeing the world as it really is. How many can see the predator that's about to jump out at you? And if you haven't seen it yet, you're dead. Right? Not at the back, just here. Right? Can anyone see it? 90% of the information your brain uses to see comes from lightness. It's staring right at you. Who thinks they can see it? Where do you think it is?
In the center.
In the center?
Yeah.
Okay, you're dead.
It's in the lower right-hand corner.
The lower right-hand corner. Let's add 10% of the information. Yes? So if I go back, you can see it was always staring at you, right? Well, this is a fairly complex scene. What about lightness, right? The simplest perception your brain has is perceiving the intensity of light, right? Surely at this level, we see the world accurately. So things that are the same should always look the same. Things that are different should look different. These two circles, intensity-wise, are exactly the same. But what happens if we don't change them? We just change what surrounds them. Do they still look the same? This one, for most, probably looks lighter than that one. Yes? If it doesn't, see me after. Okay? So this demonstrates a fundamental point. This is called simultaneous brightness contrast. We don't know how it works. But what it demonstrates is that when it comes to perception, even at the fundamental level, and remember, perception underpins everything you think, you know, you believe, the clothes you wear, the people you fall in love with, everything begins with perception. And fundamental to perception is that context is everything. Your brain did not evolve to see absolutes. It evolved to see relationships. Why? And the reason is because data is meaningless. Information is meaningless. This is true even at the level of your senses. Your brain has no access to the physical world. So the information that your senses receive conflate multiple things about the world. Size and distance. Something that's large and far away projects exactly the same as something small and up close. And your brain has no way of knowing from the information itself. So information is meaningless because it could mean anything. So how does your brain deal with this fundamental nature of uncertainty? In fact, this is the problem that your brain evolved to solve, which is uncertainty. And not just your brain, every living system is dealing with uncertainty, right? And the way it does it is by continually redefining normality. Your brain evolved to evolve. It's adapted to adapt, okay? And as we heard from the first speaker, my lab at one point was studying growth factors. And what we discovered, among other labs, is that the amount of growth factors that your brain releases is directly related to activity. The more active your brain, the more you have growth factors. The more complex are the brain cells, in this case in the cortex. These were experiments done by Marion Diamond, absolutely wonderful woman from Berkeley. If you don't know her, you should. And this is from the same area of the cortex from rats raised in a deprived environment. Okay? So I want to show you how quickly your brain can redefine normality by just using color. And I want you to notice these two desert scenes are the same, just one is just the inversion of the other. And I want you to stare at this dot between the red and the green. Don't look anywhere else. Right? Your brain is learning. It's redefining normality. It's learning that the left side of its visual field is under green light, and the right side is under red light. That's becoming its new reality. Which means everything you see after this will be a function of that recent history. You're also getting very sleepy. Right? Keep looking. Don't look anywhere else. Right? When I tell you to, I'm going to ask you to look at the dot between the desert scenes, but not yet. Okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Look there. Did it look the same? No? For 7% of the men, they will, because you're colorblind? Okay? And as you start looking around, your brain again will redefine normality. And we're just talking about color, right? The simplest perception. So what do you see when you look out into the world? You don't see the world because you can't. It's forever impossible to see the world. Nor do you see the data arising from that world because it's meaningless. Instead, your brain evolved to see a meaning that was useful to see in the past. What's more, you don't see a history of what something turned out to be. You see a history of your past perceptions. Okay? So what does it mean to see meaning? We're going to use a very obvious example, language. And I want you to read in the next few sentences. I want you to read what you see in the next few slides. Okay, we'll do it all together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Very good. 1, 2, 3. Right. 1, 2, 3. Right. Remember the instructions. Read what you see. You all failed. Right? There are no words there. There's no law of physics that tells you have to put an H between that W and A, but you do so. Why? Because your brain is encoded the statistics co-occurring letters in English and other languages. So you're seeing the meaning of the information, not the information. Notice none of you read this. What are you dreaming? Why? Because I had you reading. That was your recent history. And this is true even at the level of seeing lightness. You'll notice you see a dark brown tile at the top and a light orange tile at the side. That is your perceptual reality. You're seeing the meaning of the data. But what's the information? That those two tiles are exactly the same. That is your physical reality. That is your perceptual reality. Nothing is changing other than the meaning according to your history. And not just your history, but the history of your culture and the history of your ancestors, as Isabel will tell us later. Okay? These two tables are the same. Agreed? Okay, the red table is simply the green table on its side. Okay? They have the exact same dimensions. Say, not only do we project our colors into the world, nothing you see in the world is colored. The color couldn't exist closer to you, which is inside your mind. Right? You're defined by that ecology. We project color into the world, but what's true for color and surface and objects is also true for other people. We project the meaning of people onto them. We never see the person. They are nothing but sources of meaningless information as far as your brain is concerned. So you perceive them according to your history of past perceptions. Right? And I want you to show you how the offense here changes the perception of the meaning of the quarterback by their behavior to the defense. Sound up. Right? You can do that once, right? So what does the history of experience give you? It gives you assumptions, right? It gives you biases. Everything you do is nothing but a reflex arc grounded in the history of assumptions that your brain has encoded in the functional structure of your brain, right? Everything you do. It's not that some things have biases and some things don't, which is fundamental to your survival. Every time I take a step, my brain has hundreds of assumptions about the floor, about my legs, about everything. They keep you alive, but what was once useful may no longer be useful, which is why we have to be creative, which is why we have to see differently, right? But what it means is when it comes to perception, we are just like this frog. And I don't mean metaphorically like this frog, we are just like this frog. Okay, this is virtual reality for a frog. It's getting information, generating behavior that was useful. All right, it's doing quite well. Yeah. We're still like that frog, right? So if everything we do is a reflex grounded in our assumptions, how is it ever possible to step outside that history and see differently? Seems absolutely impossible. Well, if I have one aim in this talk, is that you will know less at the end than you think you know now. Why? Because everything interesting begins with a question. It begins with not knowing rather than knowing. What do questions do inside? And so much of our society is focused on answers, right? The cash is in the good question, not in the right answer. And good questions are hard. We don't even teach children how to ask a good question, right? What do questions do? If everything I do is grounded in my assumptions, all I have to do is change my assumptions, I change my perception, right? So imagine this is you. This is your current state. What's possible next is not everything. In fact, it's actually a limited set of steps that modeled here according to proximity and size, right? Fairly predictable. The space, which we call the space of possibility, is grounded in your biases. Change the biases, and you change the space of possibility. Two things that were once far apart can suddenly be right next to each other. Your brain never does big jumps. I can't go from here to the back of the room without passing through the space between. My brain is only ever making small steps. All I do is I change the space of possibility around me by changing my biases through questions. I want to show you how quickly you can change your perceptions by changing your assumptions just by motion. You'll see this spinning from left to right. That's because your brain assumes you're looking down onto the central surface. I want you to change that assumption. Imagine it differently. Imagine looking up at that central surface. Blur your eyes, look around it, blink, and suddenly you'll go in the opposite direction. Can you get to flip? Yes? How many can get to flip? If I tell you it's an IQ test? Oh yes, I can do it, right? All you're doing is changing. You cannot see it spinning the other direction. It's an impossible perception until you change your biases, right? Are you being creative? No. Which direction is it actually rotating, by the way? How many say left to right? Right to left? I don't care. What if I were to tell you that there's no motion on the screen at all? Nothing is moving. It's true. Glenda. Right? You're seeing a series of still images. It's an animation that are slightly different from each other. Your brain is taking that small physical difference and seeing the meaning of the change, not the change. You see the meaning of information, not the information. Right? So this idea that creativity is chaotic, messy, serendipitous, mysterious process is in fact completely wrong. There's nothing creative about creativity. Right? Creativity is only created from the outside. When you see someone putting two things that are far apart together, for them, they sit right next to each other. It's for you that they're far apart. It's because their space of possibility is different. They have different biases and assumptions from their history. Okay? So what then is the fundamental challenge to creativity? It's that we too often act with certainty. Right? We too often think we have an objective view of the world, and our view is the view. Right? If I show you anything, it's to show that you're making it all up. Okay? What's more, we could say, great, I'm going to challenge my assumptions. But the problem is, your assumptions are hidden to you. We don't actually know why we do what we do. You'll give me a reason, right? And you could pass the lie detector test. But in fact, you don't necessarily know why you're doing what you're doing. You don't know what your assumptions are. And in a longer talk, I could give you a couple of examples. Okay? And finally, you might even be able to identify your assumptions. And by the way, the best person to identify your assumptions is not you, it's someone else. Right? That's the beauty of a loving relationship, of teaching. Right? So the other point is, what if my assumptions were revealed to me? Now I have to question them. And you hate uncertainty. To not know that's a predator, it's too late. Your brain evolved to take what is uncertain and make it certain. Seasickness is a consequence of uncertainty. You go down below in a boat, your eyes are moving in register with the boat, right? And your eyes are saying, oh, we're standing still. But your inner ears are saying, no, 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 we're moving. Your brain cannot deal with that conflict, it gets ill. Why you should go up on top of the deck and watch the horizon so they move in register, right? We hate uncertainty. And one of the fundamental solutions to uncertainty you hear about in the next session, okay? So perception, what's interesting, perception is the challenge to creativity, right? But it's also the process of perception is the solution to uncertainty, right? Creativity begins with just stopping. It begins with not associating a stimulus with a meaning, to step into uncertainty. If you want to take someone to go from A to B, the first step is to take them from A to not A, right? At which point they're now in uncertainty. You now have no control over what's going to happen next, right? Fundamental to that is that space that enables you to step into uncertainty, right? So then, what makes the human mind beautiful? It might surprise you. It's that we're delusional, right? So I'm going to push you into a state of delusion. I want you to see if you can hear something interesting in this sound string. Can you hear anything interesting? Sorry? Marijuana did I hear? Of course, we're in Colorado. Right? Okay, well, let's read along. Okay, read along. Are you hearing it's fun to smoke marijuana? Yes? No? You're not sure? It's sort of a personality test, maybe, right? Are you getting, for those of you who can hear, are you getting better at hearing it? Yes? Notice you're getting better at hearing something that doesn't actually exist. You're becoming delusional. You're basing your perceptions on the history of the perceptions you had before. Not what was accurate, not anything else, but what you perceived before based on the context. Okay? So what is that sound? It's simply this played backwards.
Another one busts the dust. Another one busts the dust. Ow! Another one busts the dust. Hey!
So I'll leave you with the... So I have a challenge for you. I have a challenge for you, right? So choose your delusion, right? So which of your current... So we agree that we have been wrong in the past, right? We can all agree that. But which of your current assumptions is wrong? An impossible question to answer, right? So Glenda asked me, so that's the end of that bit. Glenda asked me to speak about a couple of examples, to take 2 minutes to talk about a couple of examples about how we're employing this way of thinking, right, in the real world, to ground it. And one example is the Lab of Misfits. What is the Lab of Misfits? The Lab of Misfits is if you're going to understand human nature, you need to study people not in a lab. A lab is just another theater. People behave in the way they think they're supposed to. You study people in the wild, as Isabel will talk about later with bonobos. That's where true nature evolves, right? So we create experiences. We turn basically the lab into a nightclub, right? And we study human nature in the environment in which we evolved, okay? And another example, which is now very familiar to you, is Pokemon Go. We didn't create Pokemon Go. We created the context for Pokemon Go 3 years ago. We call it Traces. And it's an augmented reality platform that enables you to have experiences just like Pokemon Go. Why do we do this? Because the way the brain makes meaning is by physically interacting in the real world with the people you care about. Okay? We keep forgetting that our brain evolved in a body, and our body in that world. We are defined by ecology. So the power for augmented reality, we had argued, is that that's where your brain makes meaning, right? And now everybody understands the significance of that through Pokemon Go. We have a similar platform we created 3 years ago, which enables you to leave messages, secret messages, music, even money, floating in the real world. And we emphasize the giving side of sharing rather than the broadcasting side of sharing. And finally, another example is education. We created a program called iScientist, which uses science to enable young people, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds, to step into uncertainty, to focus on questions rather than answers. Because science is a way of being. It's not a methodology. That's the craft of science. But science is a way of being that enables you to step into uncertainty. Okay? And as a consequence of this program, they became the youngest published scientists in the world from 8 to 10 years old and the youngest ever TED speaker. Okay? And now we're looking to create what we call the Hummingbird Institute, which is a real science institute just for the young girls from 6 to 16 years old in the most deprived areas around Chile, in Santiago, Chile. Okay? So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. I hope you know much less now, but understand more.